You don't belong here, Corin. This chamber was built for civilizations, not specimens. The words knifed through the stale chamber air, broadcast from the curved mouth of High Counselor Tharnak Velor. His posture, arched and looming, suggested command, but his gestures betrayed eagerness. Behind him, 4 Dravari sentries shifted in perfect rhythm, not blinking, not breathing loud enough to be noticed. Ambassador Draven Corin didn't flinch. He remained in the center ring, directly beneath the forum's axial beam, its bluish glow tracing symmetrical veins across the obsidian floor. Every beam pulse slid beneath his boots like a countdown, not to conflict, but to disappearance. The amphitheater walls trembled with layered languages, dozens of species represented, scaled, segmented, furred, spoke over one another, some with vocal cords, others via scent or vibration. Corin's translator rested in his ear, still active, still parsing hate into palatable syllables. Earth stands accused of systemic species erasure on the Nelvor satellite ring, Veilor continued, his fingers tapping into the armrest of his alloyed seat. 14 million gone. Biological traces confirm Terran interference. Core dust composition matches Earth-mind iridium. There will be no defense speech. Corin turned slightly. He scanned the upper rings where allied delegations were supposed to sit. Trescal, Verney, Mockthel. Empty. The tribunal lights dimmed in concentric circles. Above, the ceiling's dome dilated, revealing the energy-sheathed starscape of the Egreton belt, a stage reminder of the Concord's dominion. In the old days, it symbolized unity. Now, it framed the lie in a theater built for obedience. Earth's colonial expansion has violated Border Protocol 79 times, another counselor added, a Sarux delegate whose breathing sacs flared with every syllable. We have excused, overlooked, pardoned, but Nelvor was the threshold. A chime rang low from the center podium, a signal requesting speech rights. Corin raised 2 fingers. His voice, when it came, carried no emotion. Council Accord mandates open objection procedures. I invoke Article 72. The response was immediate. Objection denied. Accord rescinded for rogue states. Earth is no longer recognized under Concord Protocol. Gasps flared across the tiers, not from pity, but satisfaction. The translator in Coron's ear clicked. It was still functioning, but he didn't need it anymore. He reached up, gripped its stem and pulled it free. The motion was smooth, measured, final. He didn't drop it, not at first. He held it between his fingers. A symbol. Fragile. Stained with condescension. Passed through thousands of lips that spoke diplomacy only when war failed. Then, he let it go. The thud echoed through the chamber. Not loud, not exaggerated, but final in a way nothing else that day had been. From his side, a minor delegate from the Jarnak Republic shifted nervously. His claw tapped once against the inlaid datapad in front of him, then stopped, as if the air had become too dense to move through. Tharnak leaned forward. You will vacate this forum immediately. You are not recognized. Corin said nothing. He looked up, not at the stars, not at the chamber, but directly into the core optical sensor behind Veilor's throne, the public relay feed. Billions watching. His lips moved. Not a speech. Not a plea. Just 5 words, transmitted through encrypted subchannel only humans could decode. The feed cut. Across the council tiers, murmurs exploded. Delegates stood, translations stuttered. The chamber descended, not into panic, but confusion, raw and widening. What did he say? Was it a threat? Was it code? But Corin was already walking. No guards moved to escort him, no alarms sounded, no resistance rose from the delegation pit. Just footsteps across stone older than most known species, each step marking the erosion of a system that thought it had no predators. By the time he reached the perimeter arch, the feed had restarted, the tribunal lights had recalibrated, and the council moved on to its next scheduled session. Routine planetary trade reauthorization. But something remained in the room. A motionless node on the floor. The obsidian had absorbed its impact. The pulse lights had dimmed near it, as if unwilling to pass underneath. The Jarnak delegate tried to speak but choked on his own pheromone reflex. A Corellian archivist whispered something to his aide. On the second tier, a Drenic ambassador locked their own session notes under a privacy shield. Outside the council chamber, Corrin entered a diplomatic corridor built for parades and ceremonial envoys. He passed no one. Even the service drones had diverted their routes. His left wrist flicked once. A subdermal implant glowed amber, then red. On the outer edge of the station, beyond the shielding fields, a long-range beacon disengaged from a civilian relay tower. It drifted, quiet, coated in Terran alloys not used since first contact. Inside, the core lattice pulsed 3 times. 32 listening posts across human-occupied space received the same pulse. No content, no voice, just frequency. A memory awakened. Behind Corran, inside the chamber now sealed, a maintenance drone reached for the translator node. It lifted it with mechanical precision, scanned it for biometrics, and paused. The node pulsed once, in red, then dimmed permanently. Corrin stepped onto the evacuation shuttle. No escort, no banners, just a Terran ship designed for one. He sat. The door closed with a whisper of decompression. From a distance, the craft resembled a fragment of debris. No engine trail, no signal buoy, nothing but trajectory. As it left the station's orbit, the Council resumed its daily operations. Trade codes were revised, mining rights distributed, complaints filed. But in 5 days, the outer colonies would vanish from the network. And in 9, the first warship would return, hollow. Confirm the transmission path again. If it loops, I want trace residue from all 3 relay bands. Goran Lex's fingers worked across the heads-up interface, sweeping through overlapping telemetry shards as if decoding a conversation meant to be buried. His breath fogged the inside of his visor, more from tension than temperature. Across the command deck of Station Rendrol 3, the lights dimmed for the 3rd time in a cycle, not from damage, but because no one had recalibrated them after the last security lockdown. The chamber smelled of ion-scorched dust, dry, metallic tasting, grounded not in war, but decay. He ignored the stinging irritation behind his eyes, watching pulses on his wrist pad flicker through spectrum bands like a nervous heartbeat. 26 nodes already confirmed blackout, a junior operator muttered, not looking up. His voice sounded like it had been borrowed from someone older. Wrong, it's 32 now. Cross-check with Earth's last secure frequency. Dorse-in-line protocol, Garin said, his tone clipped. He tapped into the archival buffer, dragging a red-coded packet into the primary relay. The encryption wasn't meant to be cracked, it was designed to overwrite. The system didn't need comprehension, just obedience. Rendrol 3's outer antenna arrays began reorienting, rotating without sound, like skeletal arms pointing at phantoms. From orbit, the station appeared inert, no beacon, no exhaust flare, not even reactive heat. Inside, however, every terminal now mirrored the same pulse window. Veilfire Path Stage 2. A single confirmation light blinked on the subdeck panel. Goran exhaled slowly. Pull the lights. Drain non-essential power. I don't want them tracing energy spikes, he said. Won't that look suspicious? The operator asked, glancing up. That's the point. Let them wonder if we're hiding or failing. Below the deck, external feed nodes blinked out, one after the next, across the Terran colony grid. The Jurten colonies, once bustling with ore relay data, submitted no comms. The Thalos Rim, which maintained civilian traffic only hours before, returned carrier static. The Cascade Belt, known for trade convoys with Corellian merchants, dropped completely off system-wide radar. There were no explosions, no cries, no ships, just data gaps expanding like fractures across the known galactic map. In the Council's Central Surveillance Division, aboard Station Valis Rain, Sector Analyst Yatros Kin stood before a full-scale heads-up cartography panel. The map no longer pulsed with Terran signatures, no trace pings, no drift debris, no flagged transponders. The Terran colonies were no longer categorized as lost, they were unregistered. How many fallback signals? Yadros asked. None. Not one contingency beacon initiated. Not possible. Every colony's encoded with 3 layers of failsafe ping. The technician zoomed into one sector, Cascade Belt. All that remained was a slow, spinning orbital rig, its rotation axis off balance casting warp shadows across a dead moon. Every signal it returned was the same. We are still watching. Looped. Unchanging. Delivered in Terran Standard. The technician tried to isolate the source. No origin point could be triangulated. The signal existed everywhere and nowhere, each satellite forwarding the message as if it had been built with it. At Rendral 3, Goran reached for the control disk implanted at the base of his skull. The interface responded to his gesture, projecting his neural map across the local console. He rekeyed access to dormant orbital microarrays seeded decades earlier during peaceful negotiations. Each one lit green in sequence. Begin event masking, he said. Blend their blackouts into solar storm reports. Modify gravitational displacement data on outgoing feeds. I want every Concord observer to believe we're just missing, the operator echoed, confused. No wreckage, no residue, nothing to investigate. Goran replied. His tone wasn't bitter, it was structured. In the command deck's far corner, a storage panel slid open. Inside, 6 cryo boxes blinked red. Obsolete satellite cores, discarded years ago as unfit for military deployment. Goran tapped one with his knuckles. Use these. Retromodify them. Load single script transmission software with no onboard AI. They'll deliver messages without thinking and without leaving a signature. As the technician approached the crates, the ship's status board updated again. 32 colonies offline, no anomalies detected. Doran's gaze settled on the main viewport. Beyond the shielded alloy lattice, only starlight reflected off derelict cargo hulls drifting through a region that, minutes ago, hosted thriving settlements. Now, that same view felt blank. Not absent, but evacuated of narrative. At Valtus Rain, panic began to seed in the subcommander's voice as he connected to his superior. Sir, the Terran colonies haven't been destroyed, they've been extracted from the board. No conflict reports, no defensive triggers, no hyperspace distortions. They're not gone. They've disengaged. The response came slow. Disengaged? That's not possible. You can't unplug 32 systems from galactic infrastructure. Not even Dravari black zones can do that without spiking displacement trails. Then someone just redefined what's possible, the subcommander answered. Back on Rendral 3, Goran loaded the last command sequence. No ceremony, no confirmation protocol, just execution. The console displayed a final timestamp. Veilfire, complete. Earth is dark. Goran didn't blink. He stepped away from the terminal, removed his access glove, and placed it onto the scanning pedestal. The system cleared his credentials and purged the onboard drive. Prepare evacuation shuttles. Burn the path. Wipe Rendal 3 from the network. We're not running. We're retracting. Where will you go? The technician asked as he slung a survival pack over his shoulder. Goran didn't answer. He keyed the deck override and stepped into the corridor. Behind him, the station's lights dimmed in a cascading sequence, starting from the core and ending at the docking bay. In orbit, the ghost satellites detached and turned toward Conquer borders. Their exterior shells were black, featureless, smaller than scout pods. But every single one carried the message. They were still watching. Confirmation code matched. You're late. Reldan Mur didn't respond. He stood at the foot of the personnel lift, one gloved hand pressed against the DNA lock. The corridor leading into sublevel 9 of Arcoast Station radiated thermal fog from leaking coolant coils. No alarms, no guards, just malfunctioning infrastructure left to die. I said, Timestamp integrity was delayed, not arrival, Murr interrupted, stepping past the speaker and scanning his eye against the retinal gate. Directive received. Access was scheduled at 400. You opened the channel 2 minutes early. The technician backed away without protest. He didn't speak again. Murr walked deeper into the unlit stairwell, descending each level by feel and memory, the concrete vibrating faintly from a generator 2 decks above. The walls were damp. The ceiling pipes hissed occasionally as old gas purifiers vented residue through crack seals. Arcos was never designed for longevity. It was a husk built for a single operation. Now it served as the ignition chamber for what Earth never wanted to use. Protocol Veilfire. At sublevel 13, the air grew colder. Dust clung to his boots, fine as ash, and the flickering emergency strip lights painted the narrow hallway in uneven pulses. Murr stopped before a door sealed in 3 sections. Mechanical, chemical, and biological locks that had to disengage in sequence. He exhaled through his teeth as he keyed the external terminal. The display blinked red, then showed a line of text in Terran code. Authority. Koran. Activation window. Final. His thumbprint matched. The first lock hissed apart. He entered, alone. The control room was hexagonal, walls lined with caged conduits and exposed relays. In the center sat a chair, bolted into the floor, its neural tether slotted through a cylindrical port above. Opposite the chair, 5 consoles blinked with dormant nodes. Each was labeled with an outdated sector code from the earliest days of colonization. Sectors Earth had ceded to Concord development. He sat. The tether locked into the base of his skull without warning. The neural spike embedded in his vertebrae lit up with bioelectric feedback, and immediately the room faded from vision, replaced by grid overlays, spatial diagnostics, and trigger trees. His mind entered the Veilfire matrix. No countdown, no system boot, just a flood of dormant signal branches waiting for command prompts. He activated the first string. A dormant orbital mirror station over Delcaron 4 turned 30 degrees. It hadn't received maintenance in 27 years, yet it moved cleanly. He activated the second. Terran subterranean drills left behind on Mokra's fractured moon awoke from stasis. Their code had been buried beneath geological mapping software. No one remembered they existed. Now, they began transmitting buried core pulses, mimicking quakes, destabilizing comms relays. He accessed the third array. Old mining skiffs that had once hauled ice from Sector Varan shifted orientation. Their solar panels flickered to life. One by one, their power cores inverted polarity and began tracking nearby energy nodes. Not to siphon, but to duplicate frequencies and reroute signals to shadow address. 3 systems online, came a voice across the audio channel. I didn't request a readout, Murr replied, eyes fixed on a node, spooling a command archive. You didn't request oversight either, because Veilfire doesn't require permission. Just cooperation, the voice said. About it, he severed the connection. Within the matrix, he initiated Thread V reclamation through proxy. This node didn't affect machinery. It altered system expectations. Every Concord station that received Terran telemetry now registered Earth as inactive. Archives were rewritten, beacons reclassified. The galaxy's own networks were gaslighting themselves, forgetting Earth piece by piece. A final prompt emerged. Thread 6, CIF. Terminate host system? He hesitated. The meaning wasn't metaphorical. Arcos would erase itself from grid records. If he pressed the prompt, no recovery team would ever find it again. His eyes scanned the prompt, then pressed down. On the surface of Arcos, above the subterranean layers, solar towers flared for 2 seconds, then collapsed inward. Power grids detached. Heat vanished. Atmospheric sensors flatlined. The station folded inward like a dying insect, curling around its own failure. Felt the chair release. The tether slid out, cold and wet with coolant. He stood. Is that it? The technician asked, voice shaking. Murr walked past him. Veilfire's not an event. It's a disappearing act, one frame at a time. The technician followed, more out of confusion than duty. You don't want to see what happens next? No. He opened the exit hatch. The corridor beyond was filled with a scent of oxidized plastic and dormant coolant. You think this will work? The technician pressed again. Murr stopped. I think we never wanted it to exist. And that's why it does. He left the technician behind. Out in the orbit of Jerix 12, a derelict orbital refinery condemned decades ago, rotated just enough to catch the ambient energy of a passing Concorde surveillance drone. Inside its processing chamber, one of the mining drones Murr activated blinked red, then began recording frequency variants from the drone's scanning lens. Its core uploaded the data to a black channel buried in the drone's security handshake protocol. A minute later, the drone resumed its path, unaware that its own memory now contained a subroutine with two directives: replicate, erase. By the end of that cycle, 3 more Concorde drones would carry the same payload. And Veilfire hadn't even reached stage 4 yet. Cut to tertiary scanners, Sector R5, the main scopes lying. Commander Vosk Tarn stood hunched over the primary interface in Agiron's command pit, the crew's chatter a hushed undercurrent as he resynced the relay feeds. Beyond the hull, 11 escort ships floated in tight formation, each tethered to the flagship's Pathfinder node. On the heads-up display, however, half of them had just dropped offline without warning. No energy fluctuations, no heat spikes, not even trajectory deviations. Just vanished data. Lieutenant Oryx swiped through routing logs, his eyes darting across command prompts. They were there 4 minutes ago. Auto pins confirmed formation, delta wing and shadow flank. Now we've got null vectors across the board. Tarn's jaw tensed. If this is interference, we should have caught pulse degradation by now. Recheck ionic scatter from the tail cloud. Oryx ran the diagnostic. No scatter, no lensing, no anomalies at all. The commander tapped his forefinger against the alloy surface of the console, the rhythmic impact grounding his thoughts. A ship doesn't lose 6 others inside its own flight envelope, unless something rewrites the space around it. He tapped into Agiron's mission core and opened the contingency directory marked Con-Coda-Red Tier 6, Planetary Denial Zones. It took 7 seconds for the decrypted field to resolve. Within the file was a single name, buried under non-standard execution tags. Veilfire Contingency Human Tagged Quadrant Operations. His finger froze just above the execution lock. Oryx leaned forward. You think this is them? Tarn's response came without pause. I think nothing's being attacked. He opened a side panel and slid the command deck into blackout mode. The cabin dimmed to amber and each officer's neural band synced independently. I want all ships on passive trace. No active pings. We're not hunting. We're mapping disappearance. The remaining fleet curved its trajectory inward toward Sector Jarn, the last recorded Terran colony location before the blackout. Wavelength charts flattened. Thruster signatures became unreadable by design. Tarn's fleet wasn't just searching, they were baiting. They drifted for 42 minutes. Then Agiron's artificial gravity began to pulse. It didn't fail. It flexed, tightening and softening in irregular waves, like the ship was inhaling through an open wound. Light panels flickered asymmetrically. Data terminals reset themselves mid-success. The stars visible through the forward viewport no longer aligned with plotted starfields. From the left side navigation pit, a cadet's voice cracked. Sir, we're not in mapped territory anymore. Tarn gritted his teeth. We didn't jump. Check the gate logs. They're clean. Jump drive never activated. The commander reached toward the console, hesitated, then keyed the only drone that hadn't dropped off network. Recon 12. Deploy it. I want real-time visual feed with local projection only. The drone ejected from Agiron's port vent and shot forward. Its onboard sensors began cycling through light spectrums, mapping hull reflections and debris fields. The projection appeared in real time above the central console. No satellite network needed. What they saw wasn't a battlefield. It was a drift field. 6 Concorde vessels, intact and motionless, floated in irregular arcs. Unpowered, their navigation thrusters spun freely. Support arms remained extended as if frozen mid-maneuver. No breach marks. No damage trails. But the lights inside each vessel were darkened completely. On one ship's hull, CN's V Ferentis, the letters were distorted by a burn trace across the plating. A message had been carved in orbital-grade carbon scoring, its font Terran Standard Military Block. Observed, judged, unmade. No signs of weapon impact, no physical entry points, just dead weight in formation. Auric leaned in closer. All cores are cold. They weren't attacked. They were disabled from within. Tarn's eyes narrowed. Not disabled. Rerouted. Their systems don't know they're off. Suddenly Recon 12's feed stuttered. Not interference. Repetition. The image began repeating in cycles, replaying the same frame at staggered intervals. A minor glitch. Then a secondary stream opened on its own, showing a Gyron's. Bridge, started live feed from an unknown drone angle. Tarn shouted, "Shut the feed, now!" Or it cut the channel, but the static held on every console. No power surge, no AI failure, just input collapse. Then the bridge lights died. Emergency panels flickered, throwing the space into uneven shadows. A soft vibration spread beneath their boots. Not from engines, but from inside the structure. The deck plates began to rise and settle unpredictably, like something beneath the floor was moving. Tarn grabbed the emergency comms. Emergency Protocol Theta 9, prepare full ship-wedge separation. Cut us from the chain. But the voice that came through wasn't his crew. It was his own. Looped. Distorted. We are watching. We are watching. The comms cut again. No fire, no decompression, just void in the system's response. Tarn drew in breath and turned toward Auric. Record. Broadcast full priority beacon. Concord Core. Auric, trembling, nodded and activated the beacon. A narrow laser line transmission burst toward Concord space, tagged with fleet command codes and immediate distress tags. Tarn's last words on the record were clipped, deliberate. This is Tarn. Recon mission failed. We have not been fired upon. We have been rewritten. A minute later, a Gyron vanished from every network. Lock the archives now. I don't want Doran's name or his publications circulating beyond this floor. Darnak Veilor's voice cracked against the chamber's dome, bouncing off polished stone and alloy like shrapnel. The aides paused mid-step, their spindly digits hovering over control runes etched into their display pads. The lights above flickered, not from any system failure, but from the sheer number of restricted data pings choking the bandwidth. The Central Council platform had always carried an air of dominion, but today every step across the dais felt brittle. What once was the galaxy's highest seat of judgment now pulsed with hurried footsteps, back-channel chatter, and the scent of stress-induced pheromonal discharge from half a dozen species. Are we censoring history now? Councillor Dren Vor of the Takari Consortium folded his 3 arms, nodules along his neck spasming with distrust. You're not just burying reports, Darnak. You're suppressing a scholar's life's work. Darnak narrowed his gaze, tapping commands into his personal console embedded within the crest of the Dravari crest. The laser-inscribed surface illuminated with a red lock banner. Content access terminated. Category Terran Doctrine. You want to discuss scholarly merit while Concord vessels drift hollow? Darnak said. Doran's account of Earth's early reactionary policies wasn't history, it was a trigger. He's a liability. Vor tapped his own wrist node, accessing the secured dump before it could be wiped. Across the table, other council members tried, and failed, to access the same file. The Pact Breaker Doctrine existed before humanity was even given sector status. Vor pressed. If his analysis is accurate, they've been preparing for this since contact. They lacked the reach. Now they don't. On the far wall, a heads-up projection glitched for a breath. A pulse of static spread across the surface. Raw footage from a Gyron's last broadcast. The image had no motion, just the recorded log. Tarn's voice, broken mid-sentence, cut off by distortion. The video ended on the ship's identification plate. half covered by that same carved Terran phrase. Observed, judged, unmade. Tharnak stood, his posture stiff as the ceremonial armor fused into his collar. We're not here to indulge historical fantasies. We're here to determine the threat level and implement immediate countermeasures. Across from him, Counselor Nor Virek of the Koresh Confederacy stood slowly. His species had a history with Earth, trade routes, cultural exchanges, even early defensive pacts. His tendrils twitched behind his scaled skull, not out of anxiety but deliberation. You miscalculated, Virek said. You pushed Earth beyond withdrawal. Now they're answering without speaking. That's not war. It's retribution. The phrase hung there, thick and unmoving. Tharnak motioned to the aides again. Initiate planetary security review. I want the entire Dravari core network audited. Filter everything with Earth's old network tags. Look for shadow packet traces, even corrupted feed signatures. One aide nodded, then hesitated. Sir, we already did 3 hours ago. And? We found Terran fingerprints embedded in 10 of our unlinked satellite banks. None of them broadcast. They were just watching. The chamber fell still, not from fear, but from a vacuum of explanation. On the auxiliary council ring, Sarek Doran's name flared again. Only this time, it wasn't from his publication. It was a broadcast intercepted by deep sector receivers. A warning. A historical loop. His voice, recorded long before this cycle, echoed. The Pact-Breaker doctrine was never activated because the conditions for it were never met, but should it ever be engaged, understand this. It's not a weapon, it's an accounting system. Earth doesn't destroy. It erases equations that allow betrayal. Theranok's hands clenched. Cut that loop, flag every data relay, send kill-swip protocols to anything carrying Terran subcode. But, sir, some of those nodes are connected to Concord shared systems. If we activate wipes, we'll lose hundreds of unarchived infrastructure maps. Then lose them. Virek stepped forward. Do you even hear yourself? We're executing blind purges because one Terran walked out of a meeting without speaking. Tharnak slammed his palm into the control pedestal. No, we're purging because everything since then has vanished, including the fleets we sent to chase shadows. A comms alert blared across the chamber. Tritone sequence never heard before in open council. The beacon had originated from a civilian station in council-protected Zone 3. One of the internal guards approached with a portable feed slate, not making eye contact. Bring it, Tharnak snapped. The guard handed it over. The slate's surface displayed a single frame, a Dravari civilian evacuation route, lit by emergency torches, bodies frozen mid-run. There was no smoke, no debris, no weapons discharge, just people halted mid-movement, as if the idea of escape had been overridden. At the far end of the hallway, etched into the corridor's foundation, the same Terran message burned faintly in the stone. Tharnak turned to his aides. Start discreet evacuation protocols. Notify the primary gene vault custodians. Only inner circle officials. This chamber is now classified Tier 1 lockdown. Vor stood again, slower this time. You're preparing for planetary retreat. We're not under siege, Tharnak. We're being edited. Tharnak didn't look at him. Then I'll write what remains. They've mapped our tunnels. All of them. Even the abandoned lines under Helix Vector. Research Overseer Varn Decken didn't look up from the rotating logic map suspended across the heads-up display. His voice, low and even, carried the weight of something that wasn't yet fear, but had slipped far beyond confusion. Abels couldn't have reached that depth, said Malrith Dren, chief of Terraform Protocol. He leaned closer, his gill plate flaring slightly in disbelief. Those systems were isolated after the Concord civil insurrections. Completely offline for 80 cycles. Weren't breached, they were inherited. Decken turned to the next frame. His hand moved with mechanical precision as he manipulated the map's axis. They didn't tap into our systems. They rode through the arteries we forgot existed. The projection realigned, displaying data logs from Sector Talvon 8's terraforming grid. The readouts pulsed with dates far older than the first Earth embargo. No live traffic was shown. Only confirmation tags, each marked with Terran subcode variants tied to atmospheric bots and geoform stabilizers. Dren scratched at the edge of his cranial scale. Terraform bots? They were peaceful infrastructure. They weren't even weaponized. Belly didn't need to be. Deccan expanded the sequence and overlaid root behavior archives. We found them in what was supposed to be abandoned terraform shells, broken units dumped into reclamation pits, but their memory trees had been rerouted. Every last one contained embedded echo frames tied to observational logic. Surveillance? Worse. Replication. He tapped one unit ID. A cracked recon drone, half buried beneath sub-ice strata, began projecting a repeating internal loop. Structural blueprints of Concor's defense corridors, layered between air pressure reports and climate data. The Discovery team hadn't caught the substitution because it looked like weather tracking. It wasn't. It was infrastructure modeling, camouflaged under environmental signatures. Byrne leaned back, his skin tone shifting shades involuntarily. So we gave them the map to every oxygen chamber, coolant bank, fusion rail. By accident? Deccan keyed up a new chart. This one wasn't regional. It spanned 3 systems. They weren't passive, Molroth. They were waiting. The terraformers, the atmospheric relays, the cryo distribution pods we left behind. All of it. They didn't hack in. They left keys decades ago and waited for us to forget they owned the doors. He paused, adjusting the feed. Look here. We flagged this as an automated diagnostic loop from a failed water extraction bot. But when we ran it through the analytical decryptor, it showed starfield bleed matching dark vacuum routes, Earth abandoned during initial diplomacy. You're telling me they've been using abandoned stellar corridors to piggyback into our systems? Daily rerouted their own footprint through our junk space. What you think of as garbage? They used to seed their next move. On the far console, the automated log from Sector Helix 4 began decoding. Its pulse beat erratically, like a heart skipping every second note. The unit came online briefly, playing footage from its last 23 seconds of activity. No enemies. No movement. Just static shapes drifting across visual frames. Each resembled the profile of Terran drones, but none matched current Concord registry. Deccan stepped back from the feed. We've confirmed identical signals across multiple failed colonies. Not a single one arrived by known propulsion. They repurposed observational tech for infiltration. Harmless units now function as multi-tier sensor traps. Dren closed his hands into fists. So why hasn't anything exploded? Why haven't they struck? Because this isn't a strike. Deccan turned to face him. This is doctrine. They're rewriting our perception layer by layer, removing presence, replacing noise with absence. By the time we realize what's gone, we won't remember how to rebuild it. On the side table, a technician activated an older archive pulled from an Aethran-class survey ship, last stationed near ex-Terran diplomatic colonies. Its data log showed 3D modeling scans of discarded colony units. When the image was enhanced, the interface revealed a series of recursive glyphs, human in origin, embedded into the reflection pattern of the solar plates. The design only revealed itself when the scanner hit a 20-degree offset. Ren leaned in. Are those tags? No, Gekken answered, eyes narrowing. They're acknowledgements. Each unit carried a variation of the same phrasing, buried so deep in the reflection coding it wasn't visual unless layered through polarized light. We were here, you missed it, that's why it worked. Dren's throat clicked dryly. Have you shown this to the Council? No, not yet. This isn't a Council matter anymore. It's a collapse indicator. On the wall, the data core projection shifted to a flat line. Systems under diagnostic sweep had begun registering false positives. Code loops reading as nominal while they erased underlying access authority. Concord systems were reporting integrity while being hollowed from within. Deccan grabbed the report slate and keyed in a direct transfer to covert research archives. His access pass was one of 6 capable of uploading classified data without oversight. We're archiving everything. If this reaches the surface layers, we lose command over our own network before the public realizes something's wrong. You still think we can stop this? I think the only part left is recording how it ends. Behind them, a maintenance unit clicked to life unprompted. It had sat dormant in that lab for decades. Its task identifier read, "Waste extraction, low priority." It reoriented toward the diagnostic chamber. Its path was slow, unthreatening, and ignored, until it passed through a hallway sensor and triggered a cascade of untagged updates. System-wide lights dimmed for half a second. Not from energy loss, just from protocol redirection. The bot continued on. "They've time-stamped me." The words came from Chancellor Ulrich Drahn, head of the Concord's Outer Defense Coalition, as he stared down at the handheld diagnostic slate like it had turned radioactive. He stood motionless, locked between disbelief and something heavier. Recognition. On screen, the data stream scrolled without input. One entry. Logged 17 years ago. Location, Earth registered. Comport, decommissioned. Content. Biometric signature. Recipient, Ulrich Drahn. High Command's war room at Dalcor Bastion had never been louder. The table, oval and armored, sat under a triple-piered heads-up panel displaying emergency transmissions, political collapses, and withdrawal routes blinking red across multiple sectors. The lights overhead dimmed unexpectedly, twice in 10 minutes. Not an outage. A pattern. Counselor Vecht Morin threw a chair against the wall. "You're telling me they marked you back before the treaties were even finalized?" Ulrich didn't move. "It's not just me. There's a file queue embedded in the tracking logic. 37 names. Every senior council delegate, every military planner. The timestamps go back decades." General Craig Verne, a stone-faced veteran who rarely spoke, placed a datapad on the table. "We found those same flags buried in the maintenance core of our jumpgate network, tagged with Earth-side encryption. They weren't intercepting communications. They were indexing decision-makers." A low hiss echoed from the vent ports as atmosphere regulators adjusted to rising heat signatures in the room. Not from engines. From the room's occupants. "No wonder they never protested," Vecht muttered. "They knew who'd swing the blade. And now, they're pruning." Chancellor Belvarin activated the tabletop scanner. A visual of his personal diplomatic vessel rotated slowly. From above, the hull looked unblemished. When they switched to thermal relay, a symbol appeared beneath the outer shielding. Burned into the substrate. It wasn't visible to the naked eye. 4 angular strokes forming a Terran glyph. Selected. Varn Decken, now pulled from research duty and stationed as emergency tech analyst, interjected. "This isn't just surveillance. They used your transport lanes to build payload channels, data siphons buried in diplomatic logs. Your own travel itineraries were used to isolate planetary weak points. No breach alerts, no system spikes. We've run diagnostics for months and never saw it," Morin said. Decken gestured to the display. "Because they weren't attacking infrastructure. They were auditing personality architecture, habits, fears, behavioral bias. They studied your predictability, then waited." At the edge of the room, a security officer rushed in carrying a portable relay device. His expression was blank, but his movement stuttered. "Just pulled this from orbital relay. Classified Tier 1, he said, breath stuttering. "You need to see it." The table adjusted, relaying a drone feed from an evac site on Halvek Prime. The camera shook as its platform auto-leveled. Refugees loaded onto carriers in rows. As the ship's cargo bay lifted, the feed zoomed unintentionally, right onto the side of the shuttle. A red tag burned through the paneling. Departures tracked. The shuttle hadn't lifted yet. General Verne turned from the feed. "Shut it down, now." Drock barked. "That shuttle's carrying 3 counselors and their families. If the Terrans know that." "They already do," Deck said, cutting him off. "The message is clear. Leave and we follow. Stay and we watch." Counselor Tharnak, eyes bloodshot from 2 sleepless cycles, leaned into the chaos like a predator watching its pack fracture. "We underestimated scale," he said, his voice colder than command protocols. "This isn't Earth targeting planets or infrastructure. They've discarded the idea of territory. They're dismantling the people who created the Concord." Vect snapped. "So what now? Hide? Run to sectors they haven't mapped?" Drekken, once silent, tapped his console. "That's the trap. Our confidence in distance is the weakness. They no longer operate from planets. Their platforms are nested in repurposed debris fields, cargo shells, satellite wrecks we thought were ours. You don't outrun math, you only deny it inputs." Tharnak issued a short command: "Shut down core path diplomatic travel, immediately." Aides began scrambling as Varn placed both hands on the table. "We're assuming we still hold infrastructure, but what if—" He stopped as the light above the conference panel dimmed a third time. All devices flashed a blue screen. No text, no prompt. Just a rotating shape, a 4-pointed Terran seal, flickering between security tags and archive timestamps. Dekken's voice dropped to a whisper. "That's not a command signature." "What is it?" "It's a placeholder, the kind used before deletion." "Don't touch that terminal," Tharnak barked, stepping over a collapsed support beam as sparks hissed from the council chamber ceiling. The emergency shutters had jammed half-jump. Light filtered in at an uneven angle, making the once polished floor look fractured. The chamber smelled of scorched adhesives and insulation polymers, but nothing had burned. No explosives had been used. No fleet had fired. They had shut down the Concord from the inside out. Across the dais, broken comm slates littered the floor, most blinking red with authentication errors. The central heads-up panel displayed no data, only a still frame. Earth's seal. Static, unyielding. Drekken stepped forward, voice hushed but firm. "There are no fleet relays left outside the core. The command stations in sectors Varn, Helix, and Dorel have already defaulted to system lockdowns. The drones we sent to investigate never returned. Most didn't even transmit." General Verne pressed a palm against the deck railing. "Any retaliation plan we had depended on coordinated power networks. Earth didn't destroy the stations. They let us keep them, disconnected from purpose." Dekken tapped his console, dragging one remaining data frame onto the wall unit. This came from the old Terran delegation console. Accessed it using an outdated file decryptor, took 6 hours to unpack. The screen flickered, then solidified. "You misunderstood Harmless for incapable. Now you understand. No timestamp, no origin node. The code matched pre-war Earth diplomatic systems, now defunct." Tharnak stared at the message, unmoving. His breathing was shallow, barely audible beneath the tension settling over what remained of command. "That's not a threat. That's a conclusion." Morin paced near the edge of the dais, stepping over a snapped rail. "They didn't retaliate. They removed the system that allowed us to believe we controlled them." Vect clenched his jaw. "So, they're not coming?" "No," Dekken said without looking up. "They never had to." Tharnak approached the council console, hands clenched behind his back. "What's still functional?" "Environmental regulators. Limited comms. Structural supports," Verne replied. "But none of that matters. We can breathe, but we can't issue commands. We can speak, but no one's listening." He placed his identification token into the input port. The console blinked green, then reverted to Earth seal. Dekken pulled a decrypted file from the external buffer. This was embedded in the server core's fallback storage. It's not labeled by Concord metadata. It's Earth's original colonial projection chart. Only it's been altered. They watched as the map populated. Systems once under Terran designation now read archived. Sectors occupied by Concord presence displayed no overlay. No fleet tags. No colony data. And then, one by one, icons flickered to gray. "Not deleted. Dismissed." Tharnak's voice broke. "They've recategorized us." "Into what?" Drekken asked, though he already knew. Deccan rotated the console's frame and zoomed into the last blinking icon. It pulsed twice, then went dark. Obsolete. A low tremor shook the chamber, but nothing fell. The station's core systems had begun desyncing from each other, each treating the other as foreign. It wasn't sabotage. It was surgical isolation. In the hallway beyond, movement flickered. No alarms, no sensors triggered. Just auto doors opening to empty corridors. General Verne pulled his pistol, not for threat, but for something to hold. You were watching all along. No, Deccan corrected. They were counting. Morin slumped against the side pillar. And what now? Tharnak turned, shoulders squared, voice stripped of command but not weight. Now, we remember. Remember what? That we were warned. Above them the seal flickered once more, before collapsing into raw data. The console issued one final broadcast. No voice, no face, just a structural change across every input field. Command authority revoked. Observation status concluded. Galactic status adjusted. The chamber lights powered down section by section. No one ran. No orders were given. There was no next move.